Get on my horse now. Mountain Man found a poor, starving widow. In the dead of winter, a lonely mountain man stumbles upon a cabin on the edge of collapse. Inside, he finds a poor, starving widow, clutching a rifle with frozen hands, ready to die beside her child. Wolves circle. The roof groans. Snow pounds the mountains. He shouts one thing that will change both their lives forever. Get on my horse now. But this is no simple rescue, because buried beneath the snow are railroad stakes, and a deadly secret her late husband left behind. A secret powerful man will burn, beat, and kill to keep hidden. As the widow fights to save her child, and the mountain man risks everything to shield her. Will the truth that could save her family also destroy the town? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now. And if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Bitter mountain wind howled like a hungry beast as Noah Crow pushed his horse through snow that reached past his stirrups. His pack horse struggled behind, the lead rope going taut with each labored step. The afternoon sun hung low and weak behind thick clouds, offering little warmth against the brutal cold. Noah had planned only to check his trap lines, a routine task he'd done 1,000 times before. But something caught his attention, a thin wisp of smoke, barely visible against the gray sky. Too weak to be a proper fire, he reckoned. His instincts, honed by years in these mountains, told him something wasn't right. Turning his horse toward the smoke, Noah followed its feeble trail. The wind cut through his wool coat, but concern drove him forward. As he crested a small rise, he spotted the cabin, or what remained of it. The roof sagged dangerously under the weight of snow, and one wall had partially collapsed. No tracks marked the snow around it, fresh or old. "Hello, the cabin," Noah called out, his voice nearly lost in the wind. No answer came. Dismounting carefully, he tied both horses to a sturdy pine and approached the cabin. The door hung crooked on its hinges, letting in drifts of snow. Noah's hand instinctively moved to the revolver at his hip as he pushed the door open. The sight inside stopped him cold. A woman lay huddled in the corner, so still he first thought she might be dead. But then he saw her hands, blue with cold, clutching an old rifle. Her face was gaunt, cheeks hollow with hunger, and her threadbare dress offered little protection against the brutal cold. "Stay back," she rasped, trying to lift the rifle, but lacking the strength. "I mean it, ma'am," Noah said softly, raising his hands. "You're freezing to death in here." He took a careful step forward, noting how her eyes, though glazed with exhaustion, still held a spark of defiance. Before she could protest again, her strength failed. The rifle clattered to the floor as she slumped forward. Outside, a wolf's howl echoed across the mountain, followed by another. The pack was closing in. Noah crossed the cabin in 2 long strides. "Get on my horse now," he bellowed, his voice urgent but not unkind. "I can't," she whispered, her words slurring. "Just leave me be." "Not a chance, ma'am." Without further discussion, Noah scooped her up in his arms. She weighed no more than a child, and her body felt cold as ice through her thin dress. Quickly, he wrapped her in his heavy wool blanket, cradling her against his chest as he carried her outside. The wolves were closer now, their howls bold and hungry. Noah's horses stamped nervously, steam rising from their flanks. With careful haste, he lifted the woman onto his saddle, then swung up behind her. She sagged against him, barely conscious. Snow started falling harder as Noah turned his horse toward home. The pack horse followed, tugging at the lid rope while the wind tried to snatch away their tracks. The woman Abby Lane, he'd learned later, shivered violently against him. Noah hunched forward, trying to shelter her with his body as he urged his horse through deepening drifts. The wolves kept pace, their gray shapes flickering between trees. 5, maybe 6 of them, growing bolder as the storm intensified. Noah's horse sensed their presence and pushed on faster. but the heavy snow made every step treacherous. Time seemed to stretch like cold molasses as they climbed toward his line shack. The woman had stopped shivering, a bad sign, Noah knew. Her breathing came shallow and slow against his chest. He spoke to her constantly, though he wasn't sure she could hear him over the wind. "Stay with me, ma'am." "Not far now. Just hold on a little longer." Finally, through the curtain of snow, Noah spotted his line shack. Never had the humble building looked more welcome. He dismounted carefully, keeping one arm around Abby to stop her from falling. The wolves hung back, watching from the tree line as Noah half carried, half dragged her inside. The shack was cold and dark, but Noah worked quickly. He laid Abby on his bunk, piled every blanket he owned around her, then got a fire started in the potbelly stove. His hands shook as he struck the match, prayer moving silently through his mind. "Lord, don't let me be too late." As warmth slowly filled the small space, Noah turned back to the woman he'd rescued. Her face was pale as new snow, but he could see her chest rising and falling under the blankets. She was alive, at least. Whether she'd stay that way remained to be seen. Outside, the wolves' howls faded into the gathering dark. The storm raged on, but inside Noah's shack, a small flame of hope burned alongside the fire in the stove. He settled in to keep watch, knowing the night ahead would be long, but determined to see this stranger through to morning. Noah stirred the pot of bone broth hanging over the stove, watching as steam rose in delicate wisps. The familiar scent of sage and wild onions filled the small shack. Every hour through the long night, he carefully spooned the warm liquid between Abby's pale lips, supporting her head with one weathered hand. The woman drifted in and out of consciousness, muttering words he couldn't quite catch. Outside, the wind moaned through the pine trees, and snow continued to fall in thick curtains. The wolves had gone quiet, but their presence lingered in Noah's mind as he tended to his unexpected guest as the first gray light of dawn crept. Through the cabin's single window, Abby's eyes fluttered open. Her gaze was clearer now, though fear quickly filled it. "Sammy," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "My boy, he's still there." In the cabin, her trembling fingers clutched at Noah's sleeve. Noah's heart dropped like a stone. "There's a child?" He leaned closer, certain he must have misheard. "You left a boy there?" "Hidden under the blankets in the root cellar." Tears leaked from the corners of her eyes. "I thought I could get help and return before the storm. Though exhaustion weighed heavy on his bones from the sleepless night, Noah knew there wasn't a choice to make. He couldn't leave a child alone in that broken cabin. "I'll find him," he said, already reaching for his snowshoes. "The wolves," Abby protested weakly. "Got my rifle." Noah checked his ammunition and pulled on his thickest coat. "Keep drinking that broth. I'll be back soon as I can." The storm hit him full force as he stepped outside. Noah strapped on his snowshoes with practiced movements, then began the grueling trek back to Abby's cabin. The fresh snow had buried his tracks from the night before, but he knew these mountains like the back of his hand. Each step was a battle against the wind and deep drifts. Noah's breaths came out in white puffs as he pushed forward, worry for the boy spurring him on. The morning light struggled to penetrate the thick clouds, casting everything in a dim gray pall. When he finally reached the cabin, something caught his eye. Wooden stakes hammered into the snow at regular intervals, barely visible above the drifts. Railroad survey markers, he realized with a frown. He filed that observation away for later consideration. Right now, the boy was all that mattered. Inside the cabin, Noah quickly found the trap door to the root cellar. His heart pounded as he lifted it, dreading what he might find. But there, bundled in a nest of old quilts, lay a small boy. His face was flushed with fever, but he was alive. "Sammy?" Noah kept his voice gentle. "I'm here to take you to your mama." The child's eyes opened slightly, glazed and unfocused. He made no protest as Noah wrapped him securely in the blankets and lifted him up. The boy felt as light as a rabbit in his arms, burning with fever yet shivering. The return journey seemed twice as long with his precious cargo. Noah hunched over, shielding the boy from the worst of the wind with his body. He spoke continuously, though he wasn't sure Sammy could hear him over the storm. "Your mama's waiting for you, son. She's safe and warm." Just a little further now, when they finally reached the shack. Abby tried to rise from the bunk at the sight of them, but her strength failed her. Noah laid Sammy close to the fire, wrapping him in his best furs. Then he knelt, head bowed. "Lord," he prayed quietly, "guide these two through this valley. Give them strength to heal." "Thank you," Abby whispered from her bunk, watching her son's chest rise and fall. "But I failed him so badly. We're nothing but a burden to you now." Shame colored her words, making them bitter as winter berries. Noah shook his head firmly. "No talk of burden here. God led me to your cabin clear as any trail sign I've ever seen." He moved to the stove, filling 2 tin cups with hot broth. "Here, drink this, and then you can tell me how you came to be in that broken-down cabin." Abby's hands trembled as she accepted the cup. After a few sips, she spoke softly, her eyes never leaving her son. "The cabin was Daniel's, my husband's. He made some kind of deal with men I didn't trust. Railroad men," her voice caught. "He died before I understood what he'd signed away. Left us with nothing but trouble and that falling down cabin." Noah nodded slowly, thinking of those survey stakes standing like sentinels in the snow. But he kept his concerns to himself for now. The woman and her boy needed rest more than anything else. Whatever trouble those railroad stakes promised could wait for another day. The next morning brought a gentle reprieve from nature's fury. The howling wind settled to a whisper, and the endless curtain of snow thinned to scattered flakes. Noah stood at his cabin's window, studying the weather with experienced eyes. The woodpile had dwindled dangerously low during their vigil over Sammy's fever, and this break in the storm was Providence's answer to his prayers. He pulled on his heavy coat and grabbed his axe, the worn handle familiar in his grip. "Gotta cut some firewood while we can," he announced, his voice low to avoid waking Sammy, who finally slept peacefully. Abby pushed herself up from where she'd been sitting beside her son. "I'll help," she offered, though her legs still trembled like spring saplings in a strong wind. Noah started to refuse, but something in her proud bearing made him hesitate. He recognized the need to be useful, to pay back kindness with work. "Reckon an extra pair of hands wouldn't hurt," he said carefully. "But just for a spell." Outside, Noah led them to a stand of dead pine trees near the cabin. The morning air bit sharp and clean, and their boots crunched through the fresh snow. He demonstrated how to stack the cut logs, then set to work with his axe, making quick work of the smaller branches. Abby watched him split several logs, then reached for a piece herself. Noah saw her jaw set with determination as she positioned the wood on the stump. But when she swung the axe, her weakened arms betrayed her. The blade barely bit into the wood, and the effort sent her staggering. Noah caught her elbow before she could fall. "That's enough for now," he said firmly but kindly. "You need more rest before taking on Paul Bunyan's work." Tears of frustration gathered in her eyes, but she didn't argue. As he helped her back to the cabin, the story finally spilled out of her like spring thaw breaking through river ice. "Daniel, my husband, he signed papers with the railroad men," she confessed, settling back beside Sammy's bed. "Land rights, they said. But it wasn't his to give away. We were just homesteading, hadn't proved up yet." Her fingers twisted in her apron. "After he passed, they started coming around, calling me a squatter, making threats." Noah's hand tightened on his axe handle. "These railroad men, they been bothering you regular?" Abby nodded, her face drawn. "They want the land for their survey line. Said they'd run me off, if I didn't leave willing. She looked down at her sleeping son. I held out as long as I could, but with winter coming and Sammy so sickly ... Ain't right, Noah growled, anger burning in his chest at the thought of men threatening a widow and her sick child. You got my word long as you're under my roof. Won't nobody harm you or the boy. As evening settled in, Noah stoked the fire and added fresh logs while Abby tended to Sammy. The boy's fever had broken, but he still drifted in and out of sleep. In the gentle firelight, Abby began to sing softly, an old hymn that spoke of shelter in the storm. Her voice, though weary, carried sweet and clear in the cabin's quiet. Noah sat at the edge of the firelight, pretending to mend his snowshoes while the melody wrapped around him like a warm blanket. It had been so long since he'd heard singing in his cabin. The sound stirred something in his heart he'd thought long buried under years of solitude. Later, when Sammy had fallen into deeper sleep, Noah heard muffled sobs from Abby's corner. He looked over to see her shoulders shaking as she tried to cry quietly. "I'm sorry," she whispered, when she noticed his gaze. "I'm not usually so weak. It's just everything ... You're not weak," Noah interrupted, his voice firm and sure. "You're still here, still fighting for your boy. Ain't nothing weak about that." Morning brought a fresh start. Noah rose early to bake cornbread in his cast-iron skillet, using the last of his precious cornmeal. He added strips of dried venison he'd been saving, and soon the cabin filled with the homey smells of breakfast. They gathered around the small table, Sammy propped up in bed, Abby beside him, and Noah on his three-legged stool. Steam rose from their tin cups of chicory coffee, and the cornbread was warm and crumbly. As they shared this simple meal, Noah noticed something different in the air. Where before there had been only desperation and fear, now he saw the first flickering of hope in Abby's eyes when she smiled at her son taking small bites of food. It wasn't much. That hope fragile as a candle flame in the wind. But it was there, warming the space between them like the fire in his hearth. 2 days of rest had strengthened both Abby and Sammy, but their supplies were running dangerously low. Noah stood in the cabin's doorway at dawn, adjusting the cinch on his saddle while frost sparkled on his horse's mane. The morning air bit sharp and clean, promising fair weather for the ride to town. "I don't like you going alone," Abby said from the doorway, wrapping her shawl tighter against the cold. The snow's still deep, and if something happened ... double quotes, her voice trailed off. Heavy with worry. Noah secured the last strap and turned to face her. "Town's only 15 miles. I'll be back before dark with salt, flour, and medicine for the boy." He spoke with quiet confidence, though he knew the snowpacked trails would slow his progress. "We've already taken too much from you," Abby protested, but Noah shook his head. "Got plenty of credit at Walker's store. Been trading furs there 20 years. He swung into the saddle, adjusting his rifle in its scabbard. "Keep the door barred, and there's plenty of wood split. You'll manage fine." Abby nodded, though concern still creased her brow. Noah touched the brim of his hat and turned his horse toward town, the animal's hooves breaking through the crusty snow. Behind him, he heard the cabin door close and the bar drop into place. The journey took longer than usual. His horse had to pick its way carefully through deep drifts, and twice Noah dismounted to lead the animal around icy patches. The sun had climbed past noon by the time he reached Miller's Creek, the small town serving as a supply point for local ranchers and mountain folk. Noah tied his horse outside Walker's General Store, stamping snow from his boots before entering. The bell above the door announced his arrival, and several heads turned. Conversation died away to whispers as he approached the counter. "Morning, Tom," Noah greeted the storekeeper. "Need some supplies." While Tom gathered flour and salt, Noah couldn't help but overhear the muttered conversations behind him. 2 ranchers stood near the pot-bellied stove, speaking just loud enough to be heard. "Heard he's keeping that lame woman up at his place," one said. "The one squatting on railroad land," "Briscoe says she's nothing but a fraud," the other replied. Her man signed away those rights fair and square. Noah kept his face neutral as he added quinine and cough syrup to his order. The whispers continued, meant for his ears, but he focused on counting out coins from his leather purse. "Whole town knows she's stealing that land," a loud voice declared. Noah recognized Jed Briscoe's arrogant tone without turning. Railroad's got papers proving it. Noah secured his purchases in his saddlebags, ignoring the rancher's pointed comments. The ride home seemed longer, with the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the snow. His thoughts churned over the town's reaction. Knowing how quickly frontier gossip could turn dangerous, it was nearly dark when he reached the cabin. Warm lamplight spilled from the window, and smoke curled from the chimney. Noah heard the bar lift as soon as he called out, and Abby's relieved face appeared in the doorway. Over a supper of beans and fresh bread, Abby grew quiet, pushing food around her plate. Finally, she spoke in a low voice. "When you were in town today, did you hear talk about me?" Noah considered his words carefully. "Some folks been listening to railroad tailies. They're calling me a fraud, aren't they?" Her voice caught, saying I'm stealing land that isn't mine. "Let folks talk," Noah said firmly, reaching for the coffee pot. Truth lasts longer than lies. Abby's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. "I just want Sammy to have a chance." A home. As if hearing his name, the boy stirred in his bed by the fire. "Mama, is Mr. Crow back?" Noah moved to sit near the boy, pulling out his hunting knife and a piece of pine wood. "Right here, son. Want to learn something useful?" Sammy's eyes brightened as Noah showed him how to hold the stick and make careful cuts away from himself. For the first time since their rescue, the boy's laugh filled the cabin, a clear, bright sound that made Addie pause in her worrying the smile. The evening settled into peaceful quiet, broken only by the fire's crackle and Noah's soft instructions about whittling. But Abby's hands twisted nervously in her apron as she worked, and Noah knew the weight of the town's gossip still pressed heavy on her mind. Tomorrow would bring its own troubles, but for now, the cabin held warmth and a moment's peace. Sunday dawned bright and bitter cold, with fresh snow blanketing the yard. Abby stood at the cabin window, dressed in her best-worn dress, watching Noah hitch the wagon. "We don't have to go," Noah said, noting her pale face. "Lord hears prayers just fine from here." Abby shook her head firmly. "I won't hide any more. Sammy needs to see his mama stand tall." She helped her son bundle up in an extra wool coat Noah had found in his trunk. The wagon creaked through the snow, runners cutting fresh tracks. Noah had lined the bed with straw and blankets, creating a warm nest for Abby and Sammy. His breath frosted in the morning air as he guided the horses carefully down the mountain trail. Miller's Creek's white church steeple rose against the blue sky as they approached town. Already, buggies and wagons clustered around the small building. Abby's hands tightened on Sammy's shoulders as Noah helped them down from the wagon. Preacher Clark met them at the church steps, his kind face creasing with welcome. "Sister Lane, Brother Crow, good to see you both." He ruffled Sammy's hair. "And you too, young man. Feeling better?" But as they entered the church, whispers rustled through the pews like wind through dry leaves. Abby held her head high, though her cheeks flushed pink. Noah guided them to a back pew, positioning himself between Abby and the staring congregation. The organ wheezed to life, and hymns filled the small space. Abby's clear voice rose sweet and strong in amazing grace, making several heads turn. Noah noticed how she drew strength from the familiar words, her shoulders straightening as she sang. Preacher Clark's sermon seemed chosen with particular care that morning. He spoke of Christ's special concern for widows, of how God commanded his people to protect the vulnerable. His eyes swept the congregation as he quoted James, "Pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this, to visit the fatherless and widows in their affliction. The Lord sees how we treat the least of these. Clark continued, his voice growing passionate. When we show mercy to strangers, we show mercy to him. Several people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. After the final hymn, congregants filed out into the crisp air. Noah helped Abby and Sammy down the steps, but before they could reach their wagon, a loud voice cut through the Sunday quiet. Well, if it ain't the squatter woman herself. Jed Briscoe stood blocking their path. His expensive coat stretched tight across his chest. Got some nerve showing your face in God's house after stealing railroad land. Abby trembled beside Noah, but her voice stayed steady. That land was my husband's. We worked it honest. Your husband sold those rights fair and square. Briscoe's face reddened. Railroads got papers to prove it. Noah stepped forward, his quiet presence somehow more commanding than Briscoe's bluster. Papers don't make right, Briscoe. You know that. You're harboring a thief, Crow. Briscoe spat. Better think careful about whose side you're taking. Already have. Noah's voice carried across the churchyard, where other congregants had stopped to watch. No man's driving her off that land until the Lord himself says so. Briscoe's hand twitched near his coat pocket, but even he wasn't fool enough to draw iron on church grounds. With a final glare, he stormed away toward his waiting buggy. The ride home was quiet, with Sammy dozing against his mother's shoulder. When they reached the cabin, Abby's hand shook so badly she could barely unfasten her coat buttons. I'm sorry, she whispered, sinking into a chair by the fire. I've brought nothing but trouble to your door. Noah stirred up the coals and added fresh wood. Trouble was already there. Railroad. Man just ain't used to folks standing up to them. But your reputation in town, double quotes, Abby began. Never cared much for reputation. Noah pulled out flour and lard, starting to mix biscuits. You're under my roof now. That's all that matters. Fresh snow began falling outside as evening drew in. The cabin filled with the smell of baking biscuits and coffee. Sammy sat cross-legged by the fire, carefully whittling a stick with the small knife Noah had given him. Abby watched her son, noting how his cheeks had filled out over the past weeks, how his eyes sparkled with returning health. Despite the humiliation at church, she felt something solid and warm growing in her chest. Not quite peace, but perhaps its beginning. The biscuits came out golden brown, and they ate them with honey Noah had traded for last summer. Snow tapped softly against the windows, but inside the cabin, the fire crackled warm and bright. No one spoke of Briscoe's threats or the railroad's claims. For now, it was enough to share bread and watch the flames dance, their small family circle holding strong against the gathering storm. The afternoon, light filtered weakly through the cabin's frosted windows as Abby pulled open her husband's old trunk. The brass hinges creaked from disuse. Noah had suggested they search for extra blankets, with another cold snap coming. Mama, what's this? Sammy peered over her shoulder at the worn leather trunk, his breath making small clouds in the chilly air. Your pa's things, sweetheart. Abby's hands moved carefully through the folded clothes, each item stirring memories. A Sunday shirt, work gloves still stained with earth, letters tied with faded ribbon near the bottom. Beneath a moth-eaten wool blanket, her fingers brushed against stiff paper. She pulled out a bundle of yellow documents, held together with twine. Strange, she had never seen these before. Noah? She called, her voice uncertain. Could you look at something? He crossed the room from where he'd been banking the fire, boots quiet on the plank floor. Abby handed him the papers, watching as he moved closer to the window's light. These look official, he said, turning the brittle pages carefully. His eyes narrowed as he read. Wait here. There's something ... Noah's weathered finger traced along a line of text. This here's a treaty clause. Mentions the Ute people having rights to this whole valley. He looked up at Abby, his expression grave. According to this, they never gave up their claim to these lands. Abby's hands trembled as she took the document back. But if that's true, then the railroad ... double quotes, her voice trailed off. They're stealing twice over, Noah finished. From you and from the Ute. Sammy pressed against his mother's side, sensing the tension in the room. What does it mean, Mama? Abby stroked his hair, trying to steady herself. It means we might have a way to fight back, darling. Noah paced slowly, his mind working. I know someone who might help. There's an elderly Ute woman, White Sage, they call her. I've traded pelts with her family for years. He turned to face Abby. We could show her these papers. Fear flashed across Abby's face. The Ute? But would they even trust us? After everything white settlers have done? They value truth, Noah said firmly. And honor. White Sage's people have always dealt fair with me. He paused, watching Abby's internal struggle. Sometimes doing right means taking risks. Abby looked down at the papers in her hands, then at her son. Everything she had endured, the cold, the hunger, the shame, had been to protect him. But maybe protection meant more than just survival. As evening settled in, Abby knelt beside Sammy's bed. Noah sat in his usual spot by the fire, pretending to mend a piece of harness while she led their nightly prayers. Lord, Abby began, her voice soft but clear, we ask for strength to do what's right, even when it's hard, even when it might bring trouble. She squeezed Sammy's small hand. Help us remember that your justice is bigger than any railroad man's greed. Bigger than any railroad man's greed. Noah's hand stilled on his work as he listened. Something about Abby's quiet faith touched a place in him that had been closed off for years. Her words held no bitterness, only determination and trust. And Lord, she continued, thank you for sending us help when we needed it most. She glanced briefly toward Noah, then back to her clasped hands. Show us how to help others in return. Sammy's eyes were already heavy with sleep. He curled against his mother's side as she tucked the blankets around him. Outside, snow fell steadily, blanketing the world in silence. Abby rose and moved to the fire, warming her hands. I'm scared, she admitted softly. But I keep thinking about what you said in church, about standing up to them. Noah nodded. Fear's natural. Shows you understand what's at stake. He added another log to the fire. But you're not alone anymore. The flames cast dancing shadows on the walls as they sat together, the treaty papers lying between them on the table. Through the window, they could see the snow continuing to fall, sealing their small family closer in their shared purpose. Sammy's steady breathing joined the crack and pop of the fire, a peaceful counterpoint to the weight of their discovery. The boy slept without worry, trusting in his mother's strength and Noah's protective presence. In that moment, their cabin felt like more than just shelter from the storm. It felt like home. The morning dawned bright and cold, sunlight glinting off fresh snow. Noah hitched the horses to his wagon while Abby wrapped Sammy in layers of quilts and blankets. The tree papers lay carefully folded in her coat pocket, precious as gold. It's about half a day's ride, Noah explained, helping Abby onto the wooden seat. The Ute winter camp lies in a sheltered valley near the river bend. They set out as the sun climbed higher, their breaths making clouds in the crisp air. The wagon wheels creaked through the snow, following a trail only Noah seemed to see. Sammy huddled between them, wide-eyed at leaving the safety of the cabin. Will they be angry with us? Abby asked softly, her hands tight on the blanket around her son. Noah shook his head. Grandmother Nayeli is wise. She'd hear us out. He clicked to the horses, guiding them around a fallen tree. She's known me since I first came to these mountains, trading furs and sharing meals. The sun stood high overhead when they finally descended into a protected valley. Smoke rose from several hide-covered lodges, and children played in the packed snow. Dogs barked at their approach, bringing several men to attention. Noah raised his hand in greeting, speaking a few words in the Ute language. The men's faces remained stern but not hostile. One nodded toward a larger lodge at the camp center. That's Grandmother Nayeli's lodge, Noah explained quietly. He helped Abby and Sammy down from the wagon. Keeping a steadying hand on the boy's shoulder, an elderly woman emerged from the lodge, her silver hair gleaming in the winter sun. Her face was deeply lined, but her eyes were sharp and alert. She wore a beautifully beaded dress and wrapped a thick wool blanket around her shoulders. "Noah Crow," she said in clear English. "You bring strangers to our winter camp." "Grandmother," Noah bowed his head respectfully. "This is Abby Lane and her son. We found something you need to see." Nayeli studied them for a long moment, her gaze lingering on Sammy's thin face. "Come inside," she finally said, holding back the lodge's entrance flap. The interior was warm and smoky, with furs covering the ground. Nayeli gestured for them to sit near the central fire. Abby helped Sammy settle, then carefully withdrew the papers from her coat. "My husband," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "He signed agreements with the railroad. But we found these old treaty papers, double quotes," Noah translated as Abby explained, while Nayeli examined the documents with careful attention. The elder's expression grew grave as she read. "These words are true," she finally said, looking up. "This land was never surrendered. The railroad men speak with forked tongues, taking what is not theirs to take." Abby bowed her head, shame coloring her cheeks. "My husband helped them. I'm so sorry." "No." Nayeli's voice was firm. "Your man was deceived, like many others. The guilt lies with those who twist words and break promises." She reached out and touched Abby's hand. "You have brought truth to light. This is good medicine." Sammy watched the exchange with solemn eyes, pressed close to his mother's side. Nayeli smiled at him, her stern face softening. "The boy is hungry," she declared. "We will share food before you journey home." A young woman brought in bowls of rich stew, thick with meat and wild roots. Sammy's eyes widened at the first taste, and Nayeli nodded approvingly as he asked for more. They ate together as the winter afternoon waned, sharing the comfortable silence of a meal among friends. Abby felt tears prick her eyes at the simple kindness of it all. How different from the cold shoulders and whispers in town. As the sun began to sink, Noah helped Abby and Sammy back into the wagon. Nayeli stood in the lodge entrance, her blanket glowing orange in the sunset. "Come again," she said. "We will speak more of these papers and what must be done." She touched Sammy's cheek gently. "The boy needs fattening up. My daughters make good stew." The ride home was quiet, filled with the gentle sway of the wagon and Sammy's peaceful breathing as he dozed under the blankets. Abby watched the stars emerge in the darkening sky, feeling lighter than she had in months. "Thank you," she whispered to Noah, "for everything." He nodded, his eyes on the snowy trail ahead. But Abby saw the smile that tugged at his mouth, saw how his shoulders had relaxed. This man who had lived so long alone in the mountains had found something too, a sense of belonging, of family that had been missing from his life. The cabin's windows glowed warmly as they approached, smoke curling from the chimney into the winter night. Abby held her sleeping son close, hope blooming in her chest like a spring flower. Perhaps here, between the wisdom of the mountains and the strength of unexpected friends, they could build a future after all. Morning sunlight streamed through the cabin's frosted windows, casting long shadows across the worn plank floor. Noah's steady rhythm of the axe splitting wood echoed from outside, while inside, Abby worked dough with practiced hands. The familiar sounds mixed with the crackle of the hearth fire and Sammy's quiet humming as he whittled a stick by the window. The domesticity of it all settled around them like a warm blanket. Abby felt her shoulders relax as she worked the dough, remembering mornings in her mother's kitchen. The scent of yeast and wood smoke filled the air, making the cabin feel more like home with each passing day. Through the window, She watched Noah's broad shoulders flex as he swung the axe. Each strike was sure and strong, the wood splitting clean. A neat pile of kindling grew beside him, enough to keep them warm through the coming nights. The spell broke at the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Noah straightened, axe at ready, as Jim Wheeler rode up on his dappled Mari. The neighbor's face was creased with worry as he dismounted. "Morning, Noah," Jim called, casting a nervous glance toward the cabin. "Got word you ought to hear." Noah drove the axe into the chopping block and wiped his brow. "Speak your piece, Jim. Railroad men were in town yesterday, stirring folks up something fierce." Jim shifted his weight, hat in hands. "They're saying you're harboring a trespasser, that you're squatting on their land yourself. Some of the ranchers are listening, too." Abby's hands stilled in the dough. Through the window, she saw Noah's jaw tighten. "Much obliged for the warning," Noah said evenly. Jim nodded, remounted his horse. "Watch yourself, Noah. They're riling people up proper." He touched his hat brim and rode away, leaving a heavy silence in his wake. Abby's hands trembled as she wiped them clean on her apron. When Noah came inside, she couldn't meet his eyes. "I should go," she said quietly, her voice thick. "I won't have you losing everything because of us. You've done more than enough already." "No." Noah's voice was firm but gentle. He crossed to the table where she stood. "Running never wins. Standing does. But they'll take your home, your land. Let them try." Noah's eyes held her steady. "The Lord didn't lead me to you, and Sammy just to have me turn away now." That evening, after Sammy was tucked into his bed in the corner, Abby sat at the table while Noah trimmed the lamp wick. The flame's glow softened the cabin's shadows, but couldn't chase away the weight in her heart. "My husband," she began hesitantly. "He wasn't a good man." The words came slowly, painful as splinters working free. "He was harsh, faithless. Said God had no time for the likes of us." Noah set the lamp down carefully, listening. "Sometimes I wonder," Abby's voice caught, "if God's forgotten me too. After everything, the poverty, the shame, the railroad's threats, ... She twisted her worn wedding ring. "Maybe I deserve all this trouble. Maybe I deserve all this trouble." Noah was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft but sure. 10 years ago, I lost everything. My wife, my children, all taken by fever in one terrible week." He drew a deep breath. "I cursed God, ran to these mountains to die. But in the silence up here, I found something." "What?" Abby whispered. "Prayer." Noah's weathered hands folded on the table. "Not the fancy kind from church. Just talking, crying, sometimes shouting. And slowly, I felt him listening. Felt his strength holding me up when I couldn't stand alone." Tears spilled down Abby's cheeks. Noah reached across the table, covering her trembling hand with his own. His palm was warm, calloused from years of honest work. "God ain't forgotten you, Abby," he said softly. "He led me through that storm to your cabin. Led us both to those treaty papers. Those ain't coincidences." Abby turned her hand under his, fingers curling into his steady grip. The lamplight flickered, casting their joined shadows on the wall. Outside, snow began to fall again, but inside the cabin, something warm and healing bloomed in the quiet between them. The next morning dawned cold and clear, frost etching delicate patterns on the cabin windows. Noah stood at the door, coffee cup warming his hands, when he spotted dust rising from the trail. A group of riders approached, their horses' hooves crunching through the crusty snow. Sheriff Rourke led the procession, his badge catching the winter sun. Behind him rode several townsfolk, including Marcus Harlan, the railroad agent. His city clothes stark against the weathered garments of the others. Noah set his cup down and stepped onto the porch. Inside, he heard Abby gasp and hurry Sammy to the back room. "Morning, Noah," Sheriff Rourke called out, reining his horse to a stop. His face was drawn, uncomfortable. Got some business to discuss. Reckon you do. Noah's voice remained steady, though his hand rested near his belt. Harlan urged his horse forward. The woman needs to vacate the premises. This is railroad property, legally acquired. That so? Noah's eyes narrowed. Funny thing about legal matters. Sometimes papers tell different stories. Mrs. Lane's husband signed over any claim to this land, Harlan said sharply. She's nothing but a squatter now. The land ain't hers to leave, Noah replied, because it wasn't her husband's to sell. He met the sheriff's gaze. We found documents. This here's Ute territory, protected by treaty. Railroad's been buying stolen goods. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Sheriff Rourke shifted in his saddle, clearly torn between duty and conscience. Treaty or not, the sheriff said finally, eviction papers are coming from the territorial court. Politics being what they are. He cleared his throat. You don't have much time. How long? Noah asked. Week, maybe less. The sheriff wouldn't meet his eyes. I'm sorry, Noah. My hands are tied. The group began to disperse, but Harlan lingered. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Crow. The railroad always wins. Noah stood silent until the last rider disappeared around the bend. When he turned back inside, he found Abby crumpled in a chair, tears streaming down her face. They'll take everything, she whispered. All we have left. Noah knelt beside her chair. No, they won't. Not while I draw breath. He took her trembling hands in his. We've got truth on our side, Abby. That's worth more than all their fancy papers. She tried to smile through her tears. You sound so sure. Because I am. He squeezed her hands gently. The Lord didn't bring us this far to abandon us now. Later that afternoon, Noah sat with Sammy on the porch steps, a piece of pine wood in his weathered hands. The boy watched intently as Noah's knife shaped the wood with careful strokes. See here, Noah explained, showing Sammy how to hollow out the center. Got to make space for the air to sink through. His big hands guided the boy's smaller ones, teaching him the proper grip on the knife. The sun was setting when they finally finished. Noah helped Sammy smooth the whistle with fine sandpaper, then showed him how to blow through it. A clear, bright note pierced the evening air, startling a pair of chickadees from the nearby pine. Sammy's face lit up. It blew again, stronger this time, and the whistle's shrill song echoed off the mountainside. For a moment, the shadow of worry lifted from his young face. Inside, Abby stirred soup over the fire, trying to make their dwindling supplies last. The whistle's cheerful sound brought a brief smile to her lips, but her eyes remained troubled. After Sammy was asleep, wrapped in quilts in the corner, Abby moved to the window. Moonlight silvered the snow outside, beautiful and merciless. Noah stood beside her, close enough to feel her shiver. If they force us out, she whispered, her voice barely audible. What becomes of Sammy? Winter's still deep. We've no money, nowhere to go. Her hands clutched the windowsill. I can't watch my boy freeze or starve. I can't. Noah turned her gently to face him. In the dim light, his eyes were fierce with determination. That won't happen. Not while I'm here. But no. His voice was soft but iron firm. I swear to you, Abby, on everything I hold sacred. No harm will come to you or your boy. Whatever it takes, whatever comes, I'll stand between you and any man who tries to hurt you. Abby searched, his face finding there the strength she desperately needed. Outside, the wind sighed through the pines, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf called to its mate. But inside the cabin, in that moment of shared resolve, they found a warmth that defied the winter's chill. A piercing cry shattered the pre-dawn stillness. Abby jerked awake, her heart thundering. Across the cabin, Sammy thrashed beneath his quilts, whimpering, Mama, so cold. Abby rushed to his side, pressing her palm to his forehead. Heat radiated from his skin like a potbelly stove, His nightshirt clung to him, soaked with sweat, yet his small frame shook with violent shivers. "Noah!" Her voice cracked with fear. Noah was already moving, stoking the dying embers. The cabin filled with flickering light as he added kindling. "How long's he been like this?" "He was fine at bedtime." Abby cradled Sammy's head, her fingers combing through his sweat-dampened hair. "Please, help him." Noah retrieved dried willow bark from his stores and set water to boil. While they waited, Sammy's teeth chattered, his eyes glassy and unfocused. The boy clutched his mother's hand, his grip weak as a baby bird. "This tea will clove." "Help some," Noah said, straining the bitter brew into a cup. "But he needs more than I can give." He helped Sammy sip the medicine, supporting his trembling shoulders. "I'll ride for Dr. Matthews." "The snow," Abby started, "won't stop me." Noah pulled on his coat and checked his pistol. "Keep him warm. I'll return quick as I can." Outside, dawn painted the mountains pale gold. Noah saddled his horse with practiced speed, his breath clouding in the frigid air. The animal stamped restlessly, sensing his urgency. He'd ridden perhaps 3 miles when he heard hoofbeats approaching from multiple directions. Before he could wheel his mount, riders burst from the trees. He recognized Marcus Harlan's men-hired muscle who'd been hanging around town. "Going somewhere, Crow?" One rider sneered. Noah's horse reared as they circled him. "Got a sick child needs medicine," he said evenly. "Let me pass. Railroad says different." Another man raised a heavy club. Noah reached for his pistol, but a rope snaked around his shoulders, yanking him from the saddle. He hit the frozen ground hard, the impact riving the air from his lungs. Boots surrounded him, kicks landing like hammer blows. "Should have minded your own business." Someone spat. Noah curled inward, protecting his vital organs as the beating continued. Through swollen eyes, he glimpsed smoke rising in the distance, thick black smoke. His heart clenched. Abby's old cabin. When they finally rode away, Noah lay still, tasting blood. His ribs screamed with each breath, but Sammy's feverish face drove him to move. His horse hadn't strayed far. Thank God it took agonizing minutes to pull himself into the saddle. At the doctor's house, he nearly fell dismounting. Dr. Matthews, seeing his condition, tried to treat him first. "The boy," Noah insisted. Medicine for the boy. The sun was setting by the time Noah made it back to the cabin. The medicine bottle remained secure where he tied it to his saddle horn, though blood from his split lip had dripped onto his shirt front. Abby's gasp when she opened the door cut him deeper than any blow. "Dear God, Noah, what happened?" He stumbled inside, handing her the medicine with trembling fingers. "Railroad men, they burned your cabin too." Saw the smoke. Tears spilled down Abby's cheeks as she helped him to a chair. Sammy whimpered from his sickbed, still burning with fever. She stood frozen between them for a moment, torn between tending 2 patients. "See to your boy," Noah managed. "I'll keep." Abby measured the medicine with shaking hands, helping Sammy swallow each precious drop. Then she soaked claws in cool water, laying them on his forehead and chest. Only when his shivers began to ease did she turn to Noah. Her gentle fingers probed his injuries, cleaning dried blood from his face. "It could have killed you," she whispered. "Didn't." Noah winced as she wrapped his ribs. "Won't stop me standing with you neither." Abby's hand stilled. Everything they built was crumbling, her old home reduced to ashes, her son fighting fever, and now Noah beaten bloody for helping them. The weight of it all pressed down like an avalanche. She sank to her knees beside Sammy's bed, clasping her hands. "Lord," she whispered, voice raw with desperation, "please don't take my boy. Please don't let all this suffering be for nothing. We need your strength now, more than ever before." Noah's battered hand found her shoulder, steady despite his pain. Outside, wind moaned through the pines like a spirit crying, while inside the cabin, a mother's prayers rose up against the gathering dark. Through the endless night hours, Abby kept her vigil beside Sammy's bed. Her knees ached from kneeling on the rough wooden floor, but she barely noticed. Each time she replaced the cooling cloth on his forehead, she whispered another prayer, her voice growing hoarse but never faltering. Lord, give him strength. Please, just give him strength. Noah dozed fitfully in his chair nearby, his bruised face looking worse in the lamplight. Despite his own pain, he roused himself whenever Abby's shoulders began to shake with exhaustion. Keep faith, he murmured. The boys got fight in him. The fire burned low, casting dancing shadows across the cabin walls. Outside, the wind whispered through pine boughs, carrying the first hints of dawn. Abby pressed her palm against Sammy's chest, counting each shallow breath like precious gold coins. Just as pale morning, light began seeping through the frost-rimed windows. A soft knock sounded at the door. Noah struggled to his feet, one hand pressed against his bandaged ribs. But Abby reached it first. Grandmother Nayeli stood on the threshold, her silver hair gleaming in the dawnlight. She carried a leather pouch that smelled of herbs and smoke. Without waiting for invitation, she stepped inside, her dark eyes taking in the scene: the sick child, Noah's battered form, Abby's tear-streaked face. The spirit spoke of need here, she said simply. I have brought medicine. Abby stepped back, hope and uncertainty warring in her chest. The old woman moved to Sammy's bedside with quiet authority, laying gnarled fingers against his fevered brow. Fetch fresh water, she instructed Abby. Clean cloth, too. The boy's spirit wanders, but we will call it home. From her pouch, she drew bundles of dried herbs, some Abby recognized, others strange and sweetly pungent. With practiced movements, she began crushing them together, speaking soft words in her native tongue. Watch careful now, Nayeli told Abby. You must learn this medicine. Mix sage with fever root. Add 3 drops of pine sap. Her weathered hands guided Abby's, showing her how to work the herbs into a paste. When the poultice was ready, Nayeli began a low, rhythmic chant. She motioned for Abby to join her. Abby hesitated, her Protestant upbringing warring with desperate mother's love. Noah touched her shoulder gently. The Lord works through many hands, he said quietly. Swallowing hard, Abby began to echo the elder's words. The strange syllables felt awkward on her tongue at first, but soon she caught the rhythm. Together, they applied the poultice to Sammy's chest while the chant filled the cabin like smoke. Minutes stretched into an hour. Abby's voice grew rough, but she didn't stop. Gradually, she noticed changes in her son. His breathing deepened, his restless movements calmed. When she touched his forehead, the burning heat had lessened. By mid-morning, color had returned to Sammy's cheeks. His eyes fluttered open, clear and focused for the first time in hours. Mama? He whispered. Abby's tears fell freely as she gathered him close. I'm here, precious. I'm here. Grandmother Nayeli nodded in satisfaction. The spirits heard. Now he needs broth and rest. Overwhelmed, Abby turned to Noah. He opened his arms, and she fell against his chest, careful of his injuries. Her tears soaked his shirt as relief flooded through her. I felt it, she whispered. All through the chanting, I felt presence, God's presence. Like I haven't since before James died. She drew a shaky breath. I'd thought he'd abandoned us. Noah's hand stroked her hair. He's always been here. Sometimes we just need help seeing it. Through the cabin's window, they could hear voices from the direction of town. Word of the burned cabin had spread, and with it, outrage. The railroad's brutality had crossed a line destroying a widow's home, beating a respected mountain man, all while her child lay sick. Folks are stirring, Noah said quietly. Truth's got a way of coming to light. Grandmother Nayeli gathered her medicines, pausing at the door. When hearts turn like weather, change comes swift as spring flood. She looked at Abby with knowing eyes. Keep faith, daughter. You are not alone. Abby nodded, gratitude making her throat tight. She returned to Sammy's bedside, where he had drifted into peaceful sleep. His chest rose and fell in steady rhythm, the herbal poultice still fragrant on his skin. Outside, more voices joined the murmuring chorus of townsfolk. The tide of opinion was shifting like spring ice breaking up on the river slow at first, then all at once. But inside the cabin, Abby simply held her son's hand and gave thanks, feeling the warm presence of both divine and human love surrounding them at last. By the end of the week, sunlight streamed through the cabin windows, warming Sammy's face as he sat propped up in bed. His cheeks had regained their color, and his eyes sparkled with returning life. The herbal poultice grandmother Nayeli had taught them to make lay dried and forgotten on the bedside table. Its work complete. Noah watched from the doorway as Abby spooned hot broth into her son's mouth. The boy's strength grew daily, like a spring seedling reaching for light. It was time to act. "I'll ride out today," Noah announced, adjusting his worn leather vest. "Need to gather those who'll stand with us." Abby looked up, worry creasing her brow. "You're still healing yourself. Well enough to ride," he assured her, though his ribs still ached from the railroad men's ambush. Truth won't wait forever. His first stop was the Ute camp, where grandmother Nayeli sat mending a deerskin near her fire. She listened without surprise as Noah explained his plan to present the treaty documents. During Sunday service, when many eyes see truth, few can deny it, she nodded, her silver hair gleaming in the morning light. "I will come." From there, Noah rode to the weather-beaten church where Preacher Clark split wood for the Sunday fires. The older man leaned on his axe, face troubled. As Noah spoke, "The railroad has powerful friends," the preacher warned, wiping sweat from his brow. "But their methods shame the gospel." He straightened, decision settling in his eyes. The pulpit must serve truth before power. "You'll have it Sunday." Through the afternoon, Noah visited homes of townsfolk who had shown sympathy. The cooper whose sister had lost land to railroad schemes. The blacksmith who'd cursed the burning of Abby's cabin. One by one, they promised to attend Sunday service, to witness what would unfold. Back at the cabin, Abby sat cross-legged on the floor, needle flashing in the fading light as she mended Sammy's coat. Her fingers worked swiftly, patching worn spots and strengthening seams. "He needs to look strong," she explained, not meeting Noah's eyes. "Not like some beggar child they can dismiss." Noah understood. Appearances shouldn't matter before God, but people's hearts often needed help seeing past them. He watched her careful stitches, each one an act of mother's love and dignity combined. "What if they laugh?" she whispered, pausing in her work. "What if they whisper fraud and squatter like before?" Noah knelt beside her, his calloused hand covering hers. "Then we'll stand straighter." Truth gives its own strength. As darkness gathered outside, Noah sat at the rough-hewn table, drawing his hunting knife across a whetstone in smooth, practiced strokes. The steady scraping sound filled the cabin like a hymn. Abby looked up from where she helped. Sammy practiced walking short distances. "You expect trouble?" Noah shook his head, testing the blade's edge with his thumb. "No, but a man should face important moments with sharp tools and a ready heart." He smiled slightly. "My pa taught me that." Sammy wobbled over, leaning against the table. "Can I touch it?" "Careful now." Noah guided the boy's small finger along the knife's dull spine. "Feel that? Strong steel, but it needs tending. Like truth, got to keep it clean and sharp." Later, after Sammy slept, Abby knelt by his bedside for evening prayers. Noah stayed nearby, head bowed, lending silent strength to her whispered words. "Lord, give us courage," she prayed, moonlight silvering her face. "Help us stand in your light, whatever comes." Noah added his own silent prayer, not for victory or vengeance, but for wisdom to walk the path ahead with grace. Outside, snow began falling again, each flake catching starlight like a promise. Addie rose from her prayers, moving to check the fire. "Will you teach him more? About knives and such?" "If you'll allow it," Noah replied carefully. She nodded, something soft and trusting in her eyes. "He needs a father's lessons. About steel and truth both. About steel and truth both." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching flames dance while Snow tapped gentle fingers against the window panes. Tomorrow they would ready the wagon, sort through documents, prepare their hearts for Sunday's confrontation. But tonight was for quiet strength, for prayers rising like smoke into the vast Montana sky, for three souls bound together by something stronger than winter storms or railroad greed. The knife gleamed on the table, its edge keen in the firelight, not a threat, but a testament to readiness, to the hard-won wisdom that some things were worth defending. Like truth, like family, like hope itself. Sunday dawned clear and cold, the church bells peal carrying across the snow-covered valley. Townsfolk filed into the whitewashed building, stamping snow from their boots and settling into creaking wooden pews. Abby clutched her son's hand as they followed Noah inside, her heart thundering against her ribs. Grandmother Nayeli and two other Ute elders entered quietly, drawing startled glances. They sat with dignity in the back row, their presence lending weight to what was to come. The railroad men strode in last, Marcus Harlan and his associates, their fine coats and polished boots speaking of Eastern wealth. They took seats near the front, shoulders squared with the confidence of those used to having their way. Preacher Clark began the service with hymns and prayer, his weathered voice steady despite the tension filling the small church. Just as he prepared to deliver his sermon, Harlan rose, clearly intending to address the congregation. But Noah was faster. He stood, treaty papers in hand, and walked to the front. Abby followed, her legs trembling but her chin high. The Ute elders moved forward too, their moccasins silent on the wooden floor. "Preacher," Noah said, his voice carrying to every corner, "these documents need reading before any other business." He laid the yellowed papers on the pulpit. Preacher Clark adjusted his spectacles and began to read, his voice growing stronger with each word. The treaty's language was clear. The land had been promised to the Ute people in perpetuity. Any subsequent claims were void. Murmurs rippled through the congregation as understanding dawned. The railroad's grand plans were built on fraud. These men, Preacher Clark declared, looking directly at Harlan, had tried to steal what was never theirs to take. His voice shook with righteous anger. "They have persecuted a widow, threatened violence, and broken sacred promises." One by one, townspeople stood. The cooper spoke first. "We won't support thieves." The blacksmith followed. "No honest work can come from dishonest dealings." Harlan's face darkened. "Sheriff," he snapped, "serve those eviction papers." Sheriff Rourke stood slowly, looked around at his neighbors' faces, and shook his head. "No, sir. Not today. Not ever." The railroad men stormed out, their authority crumbling like sand. Abby sank into the pew, pulling Sammy close as tears of relief spilled down her cheeks. Noah's hand found her shoulder, steady and warm. Grandmother Nayeli approached, touching Abby's face gently. "Truth stands like mountain stone," she said softly. "Men's lies are only wind." The congregation gathered around them, offering handshakes and words of support. Where there had been whispers of squatter and fraud, now there were promises of help and friendship. Spring crept into the valley like a gentle awakening. Snowdrifts melted into trickling streams, and the first brave wildflowers pushed through softening earth. As morning mist lifted from the mountainside, wagons creaked along the trail to Abby's land. Loaded with timber and tools. Noah directed the work with quiet authority, showing folks where to set the foundation stones. Preacher Clark rolled up his sleeves alongside Ute craftsmen, while town women laid out food on makeshift tables. The air filled with the rhythm of hammers and saws, punctuated by shouts and laughter. Abby stood watching, one hand pressed to her heart. Walls rose steadily throughout the day, strong pine logs notched and fitted with care. Women called her over to help hang quilts for the windows, but her eyes kept straying to Noah. He worked tirelessly, teaching her boy how to strip bark from logs and checking each joint with practiced hands. "The Lord provides through willing hearts," Preacher Clark said softly, pausing beside her. "Your strength brought truth to light, Sister Abby. Now truth brings you home." As sunset painted the sky in amber and rose, the last shingle was nailed in place. Lanterns were lit, their warm glow spilling from new windows onto the trampled snow. Children chased each other through deepening shadows, while adults gathered for a final prayer of blessing. Noah found Abby standing alone on the porch, her eyes bright with unshed tears. He took her hand gently, his callous fingers warm against her skin. "Stay with me," he said quietly. "Not as my guest, but as my wife. Let's raise your boy together, here on this land God gave us." Abby's fingers tightened around his. "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes." Their shared smile was interrupted by delighted shrieks. Their son now, raced past with other children, his laughter ringing free and clear for the first time since winter. The sound wrapped around them like a blessing. Dawn found them on the porch again, watching the sun touch mountain peaks with gold. Abby leaned against Noah's shoulder while their boy sat whittling on the steps, his tongue stuck out in concentration. The land stretched before them, honest and true as the love that had brought them together. "Thank you, Lord," Abby murmured, peace settling in her heart like a warm blanket. Here was her home at last, not just walls and roof, but family bound by faith and sealed in love. If this story made you pause, reflect, or even smile, don't forget to subscribe. I post daily, and the next story might be exactly what you need to hear.